Welcome to episode 2 of Podcast Professors, where Dr. Will and Dr. Tom, why'd I say your name first? Dr. Tom and his little assistant, his little Igor.
The Dr. Will and Tom Show with me, your host, Will Forget, and Tom. Dr. Tom will occasionally give us his opinion on topical seasonal elements. Thank you very much for joining us today,
Will's like the Dr. Oz of the show, and I'm like the
Dr. Phil. You're more like the Dr. Phil. Anyways,
I don't think
so. Thank you very much for joining
that,
us, ladies and gentlemen.
Today our theme is dominating COVID-19 through podcasting. How can you use the environment that we're in, the pandemic, and turn it into beautiful art?
Plague podcasting with the two docs. We'll show you how it's done, ladies and gentlemen. This is how you truly podcast in times of global pandemic. It can be kind of scary. It can be kind of weird. You probably have a lot of strange ideas floating in your head, being trapped in your apartment or home or wherever you are, hiding out.
And we'll explain.
Maybe you're even in a bunker. Who knows?
After this quick
Whatever
break,
you were doing.
After this quick break, we will explain to you all the lessons you need to know to get your podcast off the ground in the middle of the pandemic and how to set up everything you need for success. Stick around. We'll be right back.
Podcasting in COVID-19 times. How are you going to do it? Stick around and we'll tell you.
All right. Welcome back to Podcast Professors. I am Dr. Tom,
and I am your host,
the man
Will,
in charge.
Dr. Will.
Will, co-teaching is one of those things that perhaps there should be a masterclass just on that alone. It's a complicated dynamic. It is kind of like, it's like learning to live with new species. It's like... it's honestly a better comparison, not to, pat myself on the back, but, it's sort of like tennis. I hit the ball over in your court and, you scramble to the other side of the court to sort of hit it back into my side of the court. The thing is, we can't all just wait. I need to serve it up. I need to you got to keep the fresh content coming at the audience here. And, I know that you're an academic, but Dr. Tom, your approach is pretty dry. We got to work with what we got here. It's more like I get up to give a speech. It's like I'm in my lecture hall where I feel at home, where I feel most comfortable in the world, talking to about 400 young, hungry minds. And as I start to give my speech,
they're hungry, but they're getting to eat is too much butter, too much bread, and the butter is stretched quite thin. The content is thin, and the amount of time that's used is sort of unnecessary.
What it feels like is I'm an award-winning professor who engineered
nominated. I might add,
who engineered. You have to be nominated to win, don't you? I engineered the POD program. I'm starting the academic, the whole tradition of the podcast as an academic form. I get up, I start. People are holding back applause just because it's this life-affirming moment that they're able to hear me talk into that podium or pass the podium to them. And then you hit that tennis ball right at my throat. That's what it feels like doing this show with you.
I wish I could disagree with that. I feel it from sort of the other side of the court, if you will. And
but the thing is, it's not a court; it's a lecture hall, and you've brought your tennis equipment to a lecture, and you are
it's sort of like, okay, I understand you might be Roger Federer, but I'm sort of a Novak Djokovic. Over here with my sneakers and my nice tennis racket. The thing is, if you have the equipment, you're just going to play better. And that's how you dominate, not only in the lecture hall, but in the podcasting world as well. And I feel like that's something we should certainly talk about in today's podcast.
Domination.
Yes.
Is the theme. And so how do you dominate? It is a question that it doesn't come intuitively. You don't wake up one morning knowing how to be a dominator. You have to learn it. You have to be taught it. And that's what we're going to talk about today, even though only one of us really has been able to dominate this discussion for you. No, only one of us has been able to dominate the instruction.
Well, Tom, you're too kind. I really do appreciate that at some points, I might be overbearing. I kind of talk outside of my own sphere of comfort. And there are times when I'll even be teaching a lecture and we'll get so off topic that I'll say, class dismissed. What the hell was that all about? The last 5 minutes there. But the thing is, the students are soaking up the information. And if you're an academic like myself, the thing is, you just tend to spout out information, and some of it falls upon receptive ears, and some of it unfortunately goes by the wayside. But the thing is, if you just keep pushing out a long stream of content, you could even host a podcast by yourself, just talking nonstop for a whole hour and 45 minutes.
I think
That's how
the stream that's coming out, I think, is a worthwhile metaphor to focus on for a second here, because what you want is a control of the water. What you essentially want is a dam that lets some water through, enough water to sustain life, to keep rivers alive, to let you go fishing, to give you drinking water. What you don't want is the dam to explode and to flood all of the cities, all of the towns in its wake. And that's the difference between Will's approach and my approach.
but is not the sight of Niagara Falls an awesome and wonderful thing to behold?
From
say
under
that we
the
want a
water,
controlled.
not so much from under the water when your house has just been washed away.
But yes, from a distance, in sort of a lecture hall environment, if you will, just sitting there observing from a safe distance, you can gain quite a bit from the experience. It's something that's truly humbling. And the thing about sort of stream of constant contact is,
Not sure what you're saying, right? Sometimes the water goes in all different directions. Sometimes
sorry about that.
It's not an easy
Paul is
stream to watch.
Sorry about that. Paul is trying to get my attention here. For those of you who don't
let's
know,
introduce Paul.
would you mind doing that? I got to talk to Paul. What do you want?
Well, so the university set us up with a Gen Z tech student after some of the unavoidable, let's be frank, errors of our premiere. So Paul, we do welcome you with.
Paul, why is that thing plugged in?
Paul, we welcome you with, let's say,
that.
closed arms, because there is a pandemic right now, and certainly we welcome you with closed legs. And I don't think
closed mouths if we could, but unfortunately, we have to use sterile social distancing techniques, and we sterilize the environment. So this show is safely produced. But Paul, hand me those wipes.
Now.
Jesus.
You actually are breaking the social distancing norm to work with Paul, whereas I am calling in remotely from the safety of my bunker. Now, I have to say, though, which one of us is the coward in that situation?
It's up for discussion, I suppose. I suppose I would not necessarily be seen as the coward for risking my life to do art. A very brave and sort of noble thing, if you will. But I do think that, being here at the university again, when there's truly, nobody here, it's a strange experience. And, it was something that was, that was kind of a shock to me, not to go back to our metaphor of Niagara Falls, but again, things that shock and awe us, awe us, if you is sort of a new thing. It's the awe us concept, something I'm working on and hopefully going to write a book about someday. But the awe inspiring, wonderful sights of things that stand out at us, they tend to make us feel more aware of our insignificance in the larger world as a whole. And the thing is, that's very good for us. Whether you're standing in front of a waterfall where millions and trillions of gallons are cascading over the edge constantly, or you're standing in the presence of a podcast pro like myself. The thing is, it's a spontaneous flow of awesome, wonderful content, and that's just something that we really God damn it, Paul.
What
can you take over here, Tom?
Let me say this much.
I just need to, getting a sound design aid was supposed to be helpful.
Let me say this much. Lesson 18 in podcasting: stay focused. Don't let your incompetent Gen Z child distract you, and certainly don't yell at
with
him
those
on
fries
mic.
down over there.
Now, this is a good point, I think, to point out. It's a good moment in the podcast to point out that there are a lot of companies out there that offer safety these days, but none of them can compete with Bunker Boys. Bunker Boys is headquartered in an hour east of Dallas, Texas, in an undisclosed location. I wasn't even supposed to say that much. I've overstepped, but they manufacture shelters with sizes ranging all over the place, to make new homes that are constructed underground in popular round culvert pipes that they are able to build. Basically, they're taking what used to be something that only the billionaire class made to escape from nuclear annihilation, and they make it for you to escape from the civilization that you ostensibly are a citizen in and a patriot of the country that you are too afraid to stay above ground and live in. So Bunker Boys has installed a bunker for me, which coincidentally just happened to coincide with some trouble I ran into with the local mafioso. So I really have no idea what's going on in the outside world in the last week. Certainly, if there's anything crazy going on, it's not in relation to that. It is exclusively just a bunker that I happen to get, and I'm really happy to be in here. We've got customized interiors that Bunker Boys are able to make. They basically, what they tell me is this is nicer than the county jail even, which, I don't know if that's exactly the phrasing I would have used, but I'm happy to have it. And I got to say, I don't feel like I'm in jail in my small, enclosed little area, but I feel liberated is what I feel like. I feel liberated from the confines of the world around me. And Bunker Boys, I'm happy to be in business with you. I will say it's great to be living off the grid. I'm really happy that I'm able to podcast from living off the grid. It was really convenient that we found a city electrical line that we could sort of jerry-rig to give me internet and to make this sound great. So, Paul, I'm not sure what you're doing because I'm producing quality sound from several feet underground. And Will, have you solved your problems with Paul? Will, are you there?
Yeah, so incidentally, Paul just sort of knocked over half of the equipment in the studio. So I can't believe
what was
how
he doing?
embarrassing this is on a live show.
How did he knock over half the equipment?
Yeah, so he was in the middle of bringing me my my mid-morning beverage, and for reasons unknown to me, lost his balance. He says he has vertigo.
Wait a second. Why was he giving you a beverage? He's there to work the soundboard, to adjust the levels. What's he giving you a beverage for? He's not your butler.
No, but he is my assistant, and as such, I do require X amount of coffee to operate on a consistent basis here. So, anyways, now that let's push that. Let's push ahead. Anyways,
okay.
But, I have to say, now that the ad is over for Bunker Boys, what is that lifestyle like? Can you tell us about how you podcast from the bunker, and I guess just sort of about the bunker itself? How is the food?
The food, well, I've got a beautiful arrangement of canned options. Certainly the canned green beans have been getting eaten. Not a lot of recycling options, but what I have found is you can turn the cans, the aluminum, into little art exhibits that I can show myself to when I'm feeling a little bit stir crazy. I will say it's been great planning for it because I've been living essentially from the confines of my home for several months now, and this really isn't that different. The only difference is I don't look out the window. I don't see anybody, yelling at me from outside. I don't hear them yelling at me, and I don't have to look at the internet if I don't want to. All I can do is I can call in, I can do a podcast, and the rest of the time, what I'm doing, I've started whittling. I spend my time whittling. I'm learning. I don't have a lot of wood here. I can't really chop down a tree. So unfortunately, probably the time it takes me to learn how to whittle will be, I will have used all of my wood reserves. But I think nevertheless, it's a good use for the hands. I'm used to working with my mouth. I talk a lot. I use my brain. And when you're living in a bunker and you don't have access to the outside world, there's limits to how much your brain can do, and I think the utility of using your brain at all. And so I'm trying to learn how to shut off. And that's the lesson for me: is how do you shut your brain off and just be? And it's like God intended.
I think not to just sort of jump in here. You absolutely can turn your brain off. It's called meditation. I do it every morning, actually, and it's a very refreshing way to sort of reset all of your thought processes. And it's truly just a great way to get in touch with your inner self. And we, as academics, I'm not sure about you, sir, since you're now calling in from a bunker. I mean, I know times are strange, but it does sound like you will be probably off the grid for the foreseeable future. I would imagine.
Well, I mean,
But
it hasn't affected my class load. I'm still teaching.
there's
I'm still dominating you every week in this class. So, I'm not sure it really impacts
well,
much.
I'm not in your class. We just sort of co-teach a class, and then I have an office down the hall from you, where I did anyways before you moved it to the bunker. So I suppose we're gonna have to really rethink as a department what's going on here.
I got to say, Will, the thing
Is it even?
the thing you realize when you live in a bunker is you've always lived in a bunker. Your office down the hall from my old office, that's a bunker, man. The house you live in, I don't know.
The thing is not necessarily, because if I was there as opposed to where you are when a nuclear bomb went off, I suppose there would be a huge difference in our survival outcomes.
It's one of the only
and that's
differences.
truly what a bunker is.
Oh yeah.
I mean, the bunker mentality might extend to other things, but the concept of the bunker, and hopefully the quality of the Bunker Boys brand is sufficient to hold up against sort of at least hopefully a low level nuclear weapon.
Oh yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
are they actually certified, or do they just build like sort of underground mole housing?
Well, they were telling me that they just got a big government contract, and so they've been building bunkers for. I don't want to say who exactly, but certain high-level officials in our government. And
Great!
If I know anything about our government and our dedication to infrastructure in this country, this baby's solid.
Pretty soon, I would imagine that we'll have a underground city, sort of mirroring the above ground city that someday we'll all live in. We might live 70 floors underground in 20 years.
One can only hope.
It's anybody's game.
I think at a certain level, when you move underground, I might feel the need to come back up. And that'll be a nice equilibrium. Maybe we should share custody of the earth. You take.
Yes, we should be on parallel planes, but never, perpendicular.
Right. Yeah. I think that would be a good system for us. So to get back on track, though, today we're talking about dominating during COVID-19. And we're talking about, first off, how do you set up a podcast, right? It's kind of a weird time. When you thought about starting some of your first podcasts, what have you learned over the years about how to get set up? What equipment do you need? What space do you have? How do you modify that space? How do we get started to then get ready to dominate?
Also, what's your pre-podcast routine? What do you do? Do you sit there drinking coffee like a madman? Or do you, meditate quietly with a cup of tea and, some sage burning in the background and sort of a hot yoga setting, if it's an option for you? How do you set up your mindset before you go into your podcast set? What is your process behind that? For a lot of us, professionals, strictly speaking, I would say that getting in that right headspace is something that we really absolutely need to do. In fact, there will be some days where I'm podcasting and I just say, you know what, forget this. I'm completely out of here. I don't have the right headspace for this. Not today. Not on a Tuesday. I just worked on Monday. And
Paul, can you turn
I
off
can't do this. I can't do this until Friday.
Paul, turn off the update noises, please. Paul, I don't know why. I feel a little insulted.
Paul, are you on Facebook?
Oh, Paul's on Facebook. Oh my God, Paul.
Okay.
Who
who sent over this guy, by the way?
It was the head of the university. It was the president or the dean. I can't remember. One of those. They all look the same to me.
Yeah, they all sort of look the same to me too. They're just all sort of round and bald and some sort of patchy facial hair. Anyways, so one of those dweebs sent you over here, Paul? Good Lord.
This guy wants graduate credit. This guy wants to start a sound design sort of company. I don't even understand what he's done. I think you and I, with our decades of experience doing podcasting, must know much more than him. How many times in the last episode did a Windows update noise play? 0. I'll tell you that much. And Paul thinks he's going to get graduate credit for this?
Dr. Tom, we spent, I don't know how many years using Skype, sort of primitive cave pig technology, if you will, Skype. And never once did we get a single notification of, a new message, bidding bing, like a huge distraction on the show. I mean, hopefully we can cut this part out, right? Just sort of talking about Paul, because I have a sort of off the record question. Can we just get rid of Paul for today, anyways?
Well, let's.
I know there's a curfew. Just go home. We don't need you. Sorry.
I mean, I think what you'll notice actually is the sound quality is going to improve once Paul walks out of the building.
Almost definitely it will improve. In fact, it might improve tenfold if he just gets out of.
Let's turn this.
You want to hear another thing?
Yeah.
I said help yourself earlier when he went into the kitchen and was like, you mind if I grab a water? He just sort of opens my fridge. And I said, yeah, sure, Paul, grab a water. That's fine. And then, 5-10 minutes later, I see him eating a pair of Hot Pockets. And I'm thinking to myself, what are you doing?
He was.
I didn't offer you the Hot Pockets. I said something to drink. Help yourself.
When you say he was eating a
liquids,
pair,
beverages,
do you mean like
that's not food?
Did he have 2 Hot Pockets on top of each other that he was biting into simultaneously?
Well, not necessarily like a double pocket, but he had microwaved 2 of them, which I found, rather presumptuous. Yeah, maybe one I would have been okay with, but he microwaved a whole box of those things, and I was just like, wow, why don't you just take over the lease, Paul?
Is that why I heard so many chewing noises as I called in before the show?
I told him not to do that on.
He tested the mic eating. He was testing how clear the sounds of his gross mouth, his chompers. That's what he was testing.
You want to know what he brought for lunch? Sort of in a little lunchbox. In addition to
how much more food does he need?
I don't know. This guy's eating all the time. You know what he brought?
What?
Celery. I said, oh my God, Paul, that's the loudest food you could possibly bring. And of course, that's what he's got packed in his lunchbox, dipping it in peanut butter as if that's going to muffle the noise. Can we seriously? Yeah, this is killing our energy here. I no longer feel as a waterfall cascading information. Now I'm a little trickle. We've dried up to
a healthy trickle,
a trickle on the show. Perhaps a creek or a stream, but certainly a flowing trickle. Regardless, can we get rid of Paul?
Yeah, Paul's out. Yeah. And let's
get out of here.
We'll give him a kind of a probationary period, but
I'd like you to buy me a new box of those, please. Thank you.
Now,
all right, bye, Paul.
We'll give him kind of a probationary period. We'll see if he can reform. Otherwise, he's failing this internship.
Can we give him a negative credit somehow? Can we detract from whatever classes he took in our department, and we can just sort of steal college credits?
Certainly,
is that allowed?
We can go find whether it was the dean or the president or whatever, and
one of those little bald men. We'll just find them and say, "Listen, that Paul man you sent over, man boy, he's getting an F in, I don't know, some sort of class in our department." And then they'll probably just say, "Oh, okay, what's the issue?" Yeah, well, he's horrible at what he does. Oh, okay. That's how that conversation will go. I know our department, Tom, and they don't there's no oversight at all.
Bunch of pushovers too. I mean, if you
can pretty much do whatever we want.
If you talk loudly, they'll conform to whatever you're suggesting.
In fact, they're very impressionable as well. So if you talk loud and then sort of convincingly, they might even, pretend to almost have the same idea. And then wow, that's a great idea, even though that's what you've been saying for the past 5 minutes.
Well, that's the trick of it. You have to get them to think that they thought of it. And once you do that, there's really, the sky's the limit, unless you need funding. So
funding's harder. But so back to our domination of not only conversations in our own department, but of the podcasting sphere as well. What sort of headspace or what sort of routine stuff do you do before you go on the mic, Tom?
Well, honestly, right before I answer that, let me just say lesson 19, always have good collaborators.
Lesson 20, never collaborate with bald men. That's sort of a personal rule, but I'll extend it. I'll allow it.
And, I have to say, I find that to be an odd rule, given the direction your hairline is going. You're not turning into a wolf man, for example.
Yes, but there's a fine line between baldness and just sort of generally not a great hairline.
So
there's a difference between a Bezos and a sort of John Candy.
So how much time does that give you then? Like a decade, and then you're done with your podcasting career?
I very well might be, or I'll just wear a wig when I podcast. It's too distracting to look at bald people podcasting. I mean, have you once watched Joe Rogan as opposed to listen to Joe Rogan? you just stare at his endless forehead. It's the sun going over the horizon. You're just, where does it end? I just personal gripes aside, though, that Rule 19 is
Lesson 20. You can ignore 19 if you want to.
21. Just ignore the past 3 rules if you would like to skip this lesson altogether.
Well, no, I think the collaboration one is important. You want to have a smooth collaboration. You don't want any conflict on a podcast.
Yeah, you don't want people talking over each other, for instance. Any sort of negative energy.
For sure, yeah. And now that Paul's gone, I feel like there's nothing but positivity in my bunker and in your office.
Yes, positive, happy energy. And honestly, the silence that I'm hearing and the absence of chewing has already made my blood pressure go down about 25 points.
And so, with that in mind, let's think about some of our pre-podcasting rituals like you were talking about. So, you said you do meditation, right?
I do, yes.
What I like to do, and I can't do it anymore, is I used to like to go chop down a tree. I'd get an axe and I'd go find to be honest, the smallest tree I could find, because it's pretty hard to chop down a tree. And I'd just whack that thing until it fell over. And then I'd go inside and I'd put on my headphones and I'd be all sweaty and out of breath. The blood would be pumping all over my body, and I was ready to start giving a lesson about some academic topic. It's
That's powerful. You would how big were the trees that you would fell?
Well, it's not the most glamorous tree chopping. It's something where they're certainly bigger than the average weed, I would say. But they're not. I don't have 3 hours to chop down a tree. It's got to be a pretty quick little exercise. So.
Sort of sounds like you would chop down a sapling almost, sort of like a small baby tree.
At what point?
Which honestly is no contest. Why not just bring a gun to steal candy from a baby at that point?
Well, on that note, I mean, biologically, at what point does a sapling become a tree? These are unanswerable questions, Will. We don't have the answers, and that leaves a gray area.
Yes, but it does sound as though you're sort of taking it while it's at its tenderest, sort of thinnest point. It does sound like it doesn't take you that long necessarily to cut these little twigs down. You're sort of hacking through underbrush at that point. It at least that's what it sounds like. We all do different things for our podcasts. I understand.
Maybe let's rephrase.
It does sound like you're just sort of hacking through a small forested area, and then you go inside and sweat.
Let's rephrase. I do a little yard work, and then I go in and podcast. How about that? You like that one a little more?
I knew it. You just
I cut down a couple things.
You prune the azaleas. You cut down a few overgrown bushes.
I beautify, and then I go talking to a mic.
Well,
how about you?
Do you do that anymore now that you have the bunker, or do you have an artificial forest in the bunker?
Yeah, what they set me up with was a little. It's like a little artificial reality, virtual reality headset, and so what I can do in there is chop down huge sequoias.
Brilliant. Endangered sequoias even.
But it's virtual, so it's okay.
Sure.
But surely we all have that fantasy, right? If there were no consequence, which type of tree would you want to cut down?
The largest, naturally.
Of course, yes. And so I cut down these huge sequoias right before I sat down here, and it's been really great. And I'm lucky to have virtual reality with these little Wii remotes or whatever you call them. And I got to say, I'm getting a lot fewer calluses. I'm also getting a lot less sweaty. So I think it's probably a step in the right direction.
I'll tell you what, I actually I use virtual reality myself in a number of ways, but particularly before podcasting. I actually I join like a re-looped virtual riot from Hong Kong, and I sort of just protest for about 10 minutes, and then I meditate, and then I drink a cup of my favorite Yogi Bashwani tea, and then I am in the proper headspace. I can think of nothing better than that as my routine. So it's sort of the getting out of your comfort zone and going somewhere crazy for 10 minutes even before you meditate. That's the key right there. So in fact, if you meditate after you cut down sort of your virtual gardening routine or whatever, or sequoias, I suppose would also be satisfying. if you meditate after, you've felled a ginormous tree, that must be an incredibly powerful feeling. And podcasting right after that, you would probably dominate any sort of topic.
On that note, we're going to wrap up part 1 of our lecture today, and we'll take a quick break. So stick around, all our students. We will be right back right here on Podcast Professors. And welcome back to Podcast Professors. I am Tom Knobloch, your professor today and every day throughout this 54-part lesson. With me here is my associate, Will, although he's not here with me.
Professor William. Or Will, some people call me Prof. Bill.
Does anyone call you Willie?
No.
Is that intentional?
Yes.
Okay, noted.
Just as if I was Richard, I wouldn't be called Dick.
Well, sure, fair enough. Now, I think something we have to talk about here. So we've talked about our pre-podcasting ritual. We haven't talked a whole lot about the actual equipment you use to podcast. So give us a rundown of how did you get comfortable with the equipment you're using right now?
That's a great question, Professor. So I would say that I'm most comfortable with equipment that I've used for a number of years. So I have specific microphone needs, specific windscreen that I use, sort of my lucky windscreen, as I call it. And then there's also a number of different wiring cables and sort of my old trusted podcast laptop, which is just my personal use laptop. But I did sort of do quite a bit of research before buying these items. I would say that I looked into what our potential competition had. There's quite a few platforms out there where you can learn how to do things. And I said, there's no good one on podcasting. So then I learned that there soon was actually a couple of them about podcasting. But I then found out what sort of equipment they used. And I said, I will do it better. I will dominate in this specific market for how to teach a successful podcast. And, I looked to my background. I looked to, being a student of NYU for several years. And I also looked at Professor Tom's background, and I said, we are a duo that would be unstoppable, and we could probably absolutely crush the market and probably the competition as well. So I use an Audio-Technica for my microphone needs, and it works out great.
That's amazing. That's an amazing, inspiring story of utter domination and annihilation. And I don't know what other Asian we might throw on there, but there's all kinds out there, right? So I think at this point we also have to consider the context. You are podcasting, if you're starting now, in the middle of the pandemic, and that's an unprecedented. Well, I guess it's not unprecedented. It's an unusual though circumstance, and what it means is everybody's starting a podcast. Have you noticed, Will, how many celebrities have started talking into their empty, echoey rooms, just using their laptop microphones?
Oh my goodness! If I had a nickel for every Zoom call I've been in with John Legend, or not even just a Zoom call, just watching him on TV be on Zoom, it's ridiculous. I can't even, I can't look at that man's face anymore.
And I do want to say, though, as well, there's another element, which is not only is it harder to get all the equipment you need, and not only is it harder to sort of figure out the navigation of a pandemic world, but there's also the plus side, which is that in times of great pain, a renaissance of art always follows. And sometimes it's not even following. Sometimes it's happening simultaneously. And I think we're in one of those periods. What do you think, Will?
Yes, I would concur. I would say, since these are such strange and troublesome times, I would say that honestly, the greatest thing you can do is to maintain that professional sound. You want your environment to be seamless in terms of, well, I suppose your transition from the professional to the personal. You want a home studio. You want the best equipment you can possibly get. You don't want people to notice, wow, this was definitely the week he went remote. This was the week that I think he stopped going into the studio for whatever reason. You want that seamless transition into, a home environment and a professional home sound.
But
as I call
also,
it.
you want to channel your pain into beautiful art that captures the moment we're in, which a few people have been able to
Truly.
do. And I want to highlight one. Instead of doing the canon of podcasting this week, I'm going to highlight a great piece of pandemic art that's ongoing. It's multi-volumed. Who would you guess is the artist who has best channeled pandemic pain into beautiful artistic product?
I would say Willem Dafoe has been really, helping me out tremendously with some podcasting needs. And, he might even start one of his own. He's got several cataloged, so he might be releasing that at any point.
He's one of those
Probably
guys
one of the
who's
greatest artists of our time.
What are some of those ones that he's cataloged? What are these unheard Willem Dafoe podcasts?
Yeah, so there's one where he talks about his experience being a lighthouse keeper, and apparently he lived in Maine for a number of months before actually shooting the film. And then he also lived in Nova Scotia for about a year in a little log cabin, sort of out in the middle of the mountains. And that's why we didn't see him in quite a lot of art. And he said that, his performance in the lighthouse was just meant to be a pivotal moment in his life. And he talks about that for about 6 to 7 hours, and it's all broken up in quite an interesting little mini series. But, I keep telling him, Willem, you got to release this. You need people to know your process. You need people to know the pain that you endured to become this character. And he says, "Oh, I don't need to do that." It's not the best impression of him.
That was a pretty bad impression, to be honest. I guess we know one avenue Will's not going to turn to after he turns bald and can't podcast anymore.
Well, certainly a bald man doing impressions would be a pitiful thing to see. But anyways, I would say that Willem does have quite a few episodes just about past works.
Can you confirm for me?
Process.
I've heard that he has done a podcast where he goes through every frame of the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man movies. Apparently, those are his favorite of the Spider-Man movies, and he's just obsessed with them. Like, every night he's bought them on Amazon, and he just turns it on as he falls asleep. It's either The Amazing Spider-Man or The Amazing Spider-Man 2. He doesn't care. He thinks those are the most perfect examples of cinema ever. And I've heard he's got Andrew Garfield in, he's got Emma Stone in, he's got Paul Giamatti in, and it's just this deep dive into literally every frame of what he considers some of the greatest masterpieces of human art.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you brought that up. Actually, he was quite a moving force in that movie, and I would say that I found that movie to be one of the best of the year for 2002.
Well, no. He's interested in the Andrew Garfield ones, not even the Tobey Maguire ones, is what I've heard.
Oh, not even the ones that he was in.
No. The ones that he wasn't. It's sort of like the ugly stepchild of the Spider-Man series is what Willem Dafoe considers, the true masterpieces. They weren't as successful as the Sam Raimi ones. They weren't as big as the Marvel ones. In fact, most people don't even remember they existed. And he's made it a personal sort of struggle, a crusade to turn that around, to make those the ones that are remembered 100 years from now.
Wow, that's powerful. That man certainly has he has some stuff going on upstairs in the attic. I would say one of his, most tortured processes, just sort of being on set and, pre-production and everything there. He said that, he felt like his art became purist. He was moved as not only a person, but an actor when he was doing his character in Finding Nemo. And he said, "My God, that movie changed me. Whether it's for the better or worse, we shall never know. But, that movie impacted something in me, and I feel like a different man."
It's powerful.
Honestly, that's probably, I'm speculating, of course. It's probably why he was an Aquaman many years later. He felt that connection to the sea and sort of nature.
It makes sense.
Specifically marine life.
I think you've got an opportunity to do a Willem Dafoe retrospective show as one of your side gigs.
Yes, well, hopefully that's in the works here soon, and we could probably get him on the show. So we'll hopefully we'll hopefully have a 4 Academy Award nominee and 3 Golden Globe Award winner on the show at some point soon. So do stay tuned, listeners. There are guests that we will bring on.
Now,
that will blow your mind.
I do want to play my clip here, though, which is it's not Willem Dafoe. It's in fact Mark Duplass. Now, the one could say one of the he's essentially the Willem Dafoe of the mumblecore movement,
Right.
Which I've heard a lot of people say. But he's taken to Instagram to make his art, which is captured. It looks like through his phone, but just imagine the amount of pain that gets channeled into this beautiful project. And think about how you might use your pain to do yours. So this will be the second installment in the anthology, though it's not because it's a classic podcast, but because it's the right sort of energy of the moment that we would want you to channel. So here we go. This is the first in his series. It's Corona the Musical, Part 1.
Corona, I don't even know ya. Now you wanna be my friend. I didn't invite you over, but now you're coming in. I have so many questions. Are you staying long? Or are you just passing through like some stupid pop song?
So there's a clip of Corona the Musical, which is just, I think, beautiful stuff. What do you think?
I have to say, I would love to watch an hour and 40 minutes of that.
It goes on, too. So here, let me play a couple of the upcoming, or a couple of the next parts here. So this is where it goes from there. I'm going to skip ahead to part 4.
I was hoping there would be more.
Oh, there is more. Here we go.
The truth is, I was raised with kindness, and I didn't feel comfortable just killing the guy. So I woke him up, and I put a knife up to his throat, and I said, you got one chance to explain yourself, and if it's not good enough, you're toast. And I remember he looked at me with this confused look, because I think he was just like, I'm from a warring nation. Why are you even doing this? And I said...
He's talking about Corona, by the way. He's personified Corona.
Listen, if I'm honest with myself, and I looked at this situation from your people's perspectives, I would see that
your
you came into
people's.
this guy's
Right, yeah.
house, he poisoned
Not
you,
the best
and
language.
he killed you without even asking what you were all about. And I didn't want to be on that side of this story. So, here we are. And... explain yourself.
So Corona has to explain itself. And then we get to this next part here, which is the last one I'm going to play.
Wow. Wait, before you do that, I have to say, I love whatever he's doing with that cheap keyboard in the background. Sort of an automated loop of I guess you could call it music playing in the background. Pretty interesting stuff.
Oh, it's fascinating. The way you can use the less eloquent sort of forms of sound in a way
The cheap sort of commonplace noises when they work themselves into art like this, it just really magnifies, sort of elevates the art.
Well, let's be clear. This is essentially the Piano Man of our generation because he's working this cheap synthesizer keyboard and he's talking into Instagram and he's recording himself at the same time, which is...
And it sounds almost as if he's got a drum loop in the background too, which is just, what a brilliant use.
Oh, he's capitalizing on the drums, which they're real drums and they're highlighted in this next part here. So the last part we're going to look at today of Corona the Musical Part 5. Here we go.
I'm just praying to God there's a drum solo.
Oh, it's about to happen. Here we go. Yeah, there we go. So,
so that sounds to me like the sound of the voice of the person who's losing their mind. So,
well, so the question there though is how much of that is performance art, how much of it is real, and he's playing with that line where it's hard to tell.
It is hard to tell. It's almost like, is this ironic? And if so, what's the angle? I suppose I just don't understand. It must be a strange feeling for him to feel, as an artist, that he needs to produce this. But just to feel as a human being, as a regular person, just doing this in your basement must be a very odd experience for him, and it must be sort of humiliating in its own lonely sort of way.
But the fact that he's expressing his pain is interesting, and especially banging on the drums like a child the first time they get them, before they've learned how to play the drums, and just screaming unintelligibly about coronavirus. In some ways, I would say that does capture 2020 in a way that very few people have been able to.
He's sort of seems to be crying as he's doing this whole thing too, which really adds another sort of subtle element of just sorrow and overwhelming, exhaustion maybe, with all the anxiety you've had. And it sounds like these drums, are probably a new outlet for him, considering that he doesn't seem to know how to play that well. But he does seem to be playing them passionately, and I can't fault him for that.
I'll say
again,
I was
he's
certainly
playing passionately and just sort of weeping over his drum kit, talking about the flu, the
virus,
the cold virus.
Yeah.
Yes.
I certainly was surprised to see he does have a full drum set. It's almost like he's just showing off instruments that he's bought. Like maybe he makes Creep 2 and Netflix gives him a lot of money, and it's like, well, what am I going to spend this on? I guess a drum set. He's got his...
It does sound like he is working with really quality drums there, I have to say. The sound is just, I don't know if they're mic'd professionally, but it certainly sounds as if, he almost is in the studio.
It's one of those things where I don't know a whole lot of people who just casually have a full drum set and don't know how to play it. And he might be a first in humanity of someone who's spent the money to have an entire drum set. And not only does he not know how to play it, he is just banging on the drums and sharing it with the world. You don't see a lot of people with that bravery, Will.
Yeah, it's almost sort of unfettered stupidity, not, for lack of a better word. I'm not saying he himself is stupid in any way.
And Mark Duplass, the character, is looking incredibly stupid.
Yes, but the man, behind the art, he's just grinning to himself from ear to ear, thinking what brilliant art this must look like.
Exactly.
When I watch it later. But you would think, and this is perhaps just me speaking, you would think that he would have some sort of cheat sheet, just to sort of look at. And it doesn't appear that he really even has sort of a simplified way of learning how to play the drums. It truly sounds as if he'd done this 2 or 3 times before in his life for the 10 years that he had owned that drum kit.
And I like to
speculative, of course.
Think about the fact that this was recorded. So on
Instagram Live, yes.
Well, it's on just his normal Instagram. So I don't know, maybe it started on Instagram Live, but the point is he could have done maybe a take 2 where maybe you could hear the lyrics. You could understand what he's saying. Maybe he could refine the actual rhythm of what he's playing.
the raw emotionality of his voice, and he almost sounds like a shaman, sort of incanting some magic spell to sort of break the virus. Perhaps he himself has the virus, and he's sort of in the feverish stages of the disease.
I like to think of him as a shaman. I think that is the best reading that I've heard of this work. And I think in that sense, there is something soothing about it to hear just that unfettered rage. And I think if I were to add a meditation to my pre-podcasting ritual, I might play that drum solo.
Or at least the virtual drums. And hopefully they would be, it'd be a little bit better quality. But that aside, I do say that, I would have appreciated a few shrieks, maybe some yelps in there. He maybe he could throw in one like a little
high pitched one, yeah, a little whoop,
yes,
whoop.
A little whoop or something to just sort of make it sound more spiritual in some way, because it does sound like the rantings of a madman, but that's just to the unobserved, outsider, I would say, not to somebody as keenly trained in the art of entertainment and podcasting as us.
Yeah, I agree for sure. And, I think we're right in that it's somewhere between a tribal ritual and the Ramones is sort of the sound he's going for. And it's a beautiful merge of those two different styles. And so
It's almost as if the Bee Gees had a son who didn't know how to play any instruments.
It's like the son before he grows up. It's like the child
Yes.
has found has wandered into the studio where they're taking a break from recording a new song, and the child has just wandered onto the drum set.
But he's sort of singing in the voice of a teenager.
Yeah.
And just sort of making a lot of heartfelt shrieks.
Yes. And so I think that closes part 2 of the anthology we're putting together here of the worthwhile things to look at as you're starting your podcast. So there are all kinds of lessons in here for channeling your pain. And I think it's important. So as far as where we go from here, I think it's time for you guys. We got a question from one of our class. I was going to say classmates. That's definitely not true. One of our students. You're certainly not equals with us, so don't let that one slide. Woo!
Don't do that.
But so let me pull up the exact phrasing here. But it was based on the fact that the show has started. We had one of our students named Will. Interestingly, I don't think it was you. I think it was someone else with the same name, which it's a common name. Like many things about your personality, easily replicated. He says, "How did you?"
I resent that.
Well, hold on a second. Hold your resentment. I'm trying to do.
Please
something here.
continue.
Says,
I'm sure this is important.
how did you know how to set up a podcast without having first listened to this podcast?
Well, that is the question.
Sort of a chicken and the egg question.
Yes. Well, I suppose you could ask a circular question and get a circular answer, but I would say being as straightforward as possible, we didn't need to listen to this. We had ingrained in our memories and in our past experiences all of the skills that we needed to make this podcast as successful as previous ones. And I know that my podcasts particularly have not reached the mainstream yet. I know you, Professor Tom, you're syndicated, and well,
yes,
congratulations for that, sir. But you know, there's a difference between being successful and being fulfilled. And I truly feel that, you know, in my own experience, I've successfully had many podcasts, some released to very small acclaim, and then some unreleased, hundreds of hours of catalogs,
imperceptibly small acclaim in many cases, I think,
but acclaim nonetheless. Yes, and still, there are people who ask, please release the files. You know, I have hundreds of hours of recordings of just this, and cooking dinner.
Is this the tech guy trying to make space on the drive? He says, "Release the files," as in delete the files.
Oh God, Paul. I recorded an ASMR series just of me cooking in the kitchen for dinner, and my God, I listen to that sometimes, just my own work, which is not selfish or facetious, and I listen to that and I say, wow, I am so relaxed right now. I could just take a hot bath and drown in it. You know,
yeah. I've listened to your sounds of emptying the dishwasher.
Well, that's not the best. I mean, if you listen to the sound of frying fish, that's certainly one of the best. I listen to that one consistently.
Sounds of the silverware drawer. It was an interesting little diversion, I suppose. I thought a little long.
Well, chopping up the lettuce is a little bit more. It sounds a little better on the ears, and also the crunch. It sounds, perhaps maybe you're not an ASMR person, Tom. It is a select few of us. Who appreciate it, and some of us just can't appreciate it. They just think it's a pointless thing that they'll never understand, and fortunately they probably never will, because it just is something that is appreciated by the few and misunderstood by all.
Well, on that note, I suppose we're about wrapping up lesson number 2 here. So what the key takeaways from this lesson were: always dominate in your space. Collaborate intelligently, ignore the lesson about being bald, and what am I missing?
Something about bunker. Oh yes, always maintain a professional sound.
Yes,
whether you're in a bunker, whether you're in a bunker boys bunker, which, by the way, we'll talk about that off air. But anyways, bunker boys bunker, or you're in a tree house, just hoping to put together a little ramshackle setup. The thing is, make it sound professional. Whether you need to take out a second mortgage to buy the $40,000 equipment in our basic podcast professors bundle. The thing is, you should feel fulfilled, and you'll only feel fulfilled if you have the right equipment and the right sound. So that is the final lesson for today, I would say, in the canonical text.
Now, you, I understand, have been doing a lot of renovating to your house to try to make sure it sounds as good as possible. How has that been going?
Well, I did retile all the ceiling. The thing is, the material I got is great, but it came in the wrong color. So I ordered a sort of a sage green, and it came in black. And so I was like, what am I going to do with this? And they said, well, we could ship it back and take about 7 to 9 weeks, business weeks, to go ahead and replace it with the sage green. I said, my God, where are you getting these tiles from? They said, well, that's not your problem, really. Your problem is we gave you the wrong color. And I said, well, that's not really my problem. That's your problem that now became my problem that I need to fix. And anyways, long story short, I do have black ceiling tiles, which do absorb an incredible amount of heat. So sometimes it sort of feels like living in an oven. But the thing is, the sound is beautiful.
It was beautiful up to this point. I feel like I'm hearing a lot of water right now. Is there? Did you open a window? Is there a river outside your house?
Well, it does seem to be raining pretty hard. That was happening earlier, but this is the first I'm seeing of any sort of.
This doesn't sound like rain. This sounds like a stream, perhaps.
If only, it seems as though Paul left at the perfect timing. I really could have used some help now.
What's happening? Explain it to me. What's going on?
So there's a leak from the left corner of my ceiling here.
That doesn't sound. That can't be a few drops though. How much water is coming out of that?
Well, I do live underground, and one thing you shouldn't do in Florida is live underground. So
I thought we decided only one of us could live underground at a time.
Well, it's a partial underground, but it was mostly just cheap, I just wanted a cheap place to stay, and
it sounds pretty bad. Are you in danger of drowning? Do I need to come up from my bunker?
I would say
and help
my
you?
socks are wet as of right now, so that's not good. Nonetheless, we'll just keep podcasting through it. The greatest art is made when you're overcoming an obstacle.
That's the lesson. That's the big
Walden
takeaway.
once said.
And so, I mean, just like coronavirus, just like we're all podcasting through the coronavirus, Will is podcasting through the flooding of his underground Florida home. And so, on that note, I think, before we go, I think we do have to do one last thing, which is our ad break. So you want to do our final sponsor break before we call it a week?
Sure. Okay. Well, I'll try and make it quick. Okay. So if you are in a bunker or you're above ground, or however your living situation is, we recommend you try Louis Italian Beef. Now, Louis Italian Beef has a number of products. They do a beef au jus seasoning.
Oh, that's bad.
They have several packets you can buy at your local grocery store. But Louis Italian Beef is a family company, right? They're a father and son business. They decided to expand their dry mix empire, if you will, to include seasonings for sandwich toppings, and sort of local salad buffets and the like.
Are there some creatures in there with you, Will?
The water is about knee high, so there could be something in there.
It sounds like a whale. Watch out!
My God. Oh my God! I think it's a manatee.
It sounds beautiful, though. I mean, you might want to lift
standing on my chair.
The sound equipment up so you doesn't get submerged.
Yeah, I should probably seek higher ground.
Anyway, finish the sponsor break. We got to persevere.
Yes. In 2015, Louis Seasoning Company again expanded and purchased the Fish and Delight Kentucky coating mixes. These cornmeal coatings are available in a hot and spicy original and are great for frying or baking fish, chicken, or vegetable. Okay, sorry. Just a manatee brushed against my leg.
Beautiful. It's a beautiful
From our
moment.
ancestors in Quigione, Italy, to your table, we bring the taste of authentic pasta sauce, beef seasonings, and many others for you and your family to enjoy. So, Louis Beef and Chicken Seasoning, everybody, check it out.
All right, and I think that just about does it for Podcast Professors. So stay tuned. We'll be back next week with another great lesson for you. Signing off, I am Professor Tom.
And I am Professor Will. Thanks very much for joining us today, everybody. We hope you learned quite a bit about podcasting, how to sort of, oh my God, how to dominate in the podcasting sphere, how to crush the competition, and how to, well, we better end the show before I teach you how to tame a manatee. All right, goodbye.